I'm Shane White, and this is The Process.
Hey gang, Shane White here with another edition of The Process. Today I'm illustrating a cover for the Overman Collected Edition. It's a new edition that has at least 200 pages, which is, I'm not sure if it's like 25 more pages than the trade paperback did a few years ago, but it's now available at Comixology.com. This is kind of like revisiting old friends. Because I know these characters really well, for whatever reason, the cover is going a lot easier than I had anticipated. So throwing these thumbnails over the fence to my writing partner, Scott Reed, he and I decided on something in between a few of the thumbnails. So here I'm just marking up the thumbnail, trying to create a grid so I can transfer the drawing onto a larger piece of paper. Dmitry Leonov, the red character, is towering over Nathan Fisher, the hired killer who is trying to stop the end of the world. And so, in doing the research, I'm trying to remember how I drew some of these characters. It's been quite a while, so even though I'm familiar with them, it's still one of those things like you get so many projects beyond something and it's like, well, what is this? If you're not familiar with this tool, it's a pencil sharpener, the manual kind. I think I got that at my 13th birthday or something, and I've had it ever since. I like it. I've been stopped at the airport several times with it, and people have asked, what the heck that was, and it's like, well, it's a pencil sharpener, and they're kind of clueless. I'm surprised, actually, because they look as old as I am, so... When I start to do a layout on a large piece of paper and I'm transferring something from a thumbnail, I mark up the larger paper the same way I marked up the thumbnail. I'll find the center of the page and then I'll just try to map out the large shapes in a way that I can keep the energy and the gestures of the small thumbnails that I like so much. You'll notice when I'm doing a layout like this, I'll hold the pencil as if I were in a live drawing class. What it does is it helps give me a little more arm movement. I can't focus too much on detail, and so I tend to get those big shapes moving around really well. And then I'll switch over and I'll start adding more detail, holding the pencil a little more traditionally. Going back and forth between the two helped me keep things a little bit looser. And you'll probably find it in your own work if you hold back further on the pencil that you have more options as far as energy and getting the character down a little better. Once I finish the blue line, I'll go and rub it out with a kneaded eraser just to get rid of a lot of the excess blue. And that'll help lighten it up a little bit and even it out more, so when I go back in, I can pencil it. Now, when I originally drew the series for Image years ago, I worked a lot smaller. I actually drew the entire book at 8.5 by 11, and then I blew it up and I inked it from printouts that I did. That helped me keep a regular freelance career going and get a comic book done each month for, I think, 5 months. Because I took that approach, while I was able to pencil at least 3 to 4 pages a day, I could ink about 2 to 3 pages a day. But because this is a cover, I wanted to spend a little more time and get a little more detail in there. So I figured, well, why not try to make a larger attempt at it and really sink my teeth into the characters a little bit more and a lot of that fun texture that Dmitry Leonov has. Now, Dmitry is a biomech machine, a man who was a general for the Russian army, and he ended up being adapted into a war machine. And so he's out to pretty much destroy everything, and Nathan is trying to stop him. And as you can see, the scale of the two characters is so great that I think it really makes for an interesting cover. One thing to keep in mind when illustrating is, or especially when you're penciling comics, what's nice is if you can separate the types of material from each other. The strokes that you may put in for, say, smoke might be a lot different than something you'd put in for, say, leather or skin or hair. I think it's important to, not use the same brush or the same technique to render everything equally, because we're basically trying to convince people of the atmosphere or the fact that an object is shiny or leather. You don't want to go crazy where it's so disparate that it doesn't make sense as a whole, but keeping those things in mind will help differentiate your subject matter. One thing that might help is to study the Fresnel effect of reflective objects. If you look at, say, a chrome ball or a wheel hub on a car versus, say, leather versus metal or rusted metal, you'll see that the spread of the highlight is different, and the way you translate that in pencil in whatever style you're working in is important, and you can really get a lot more mileage out of things if you pay attention to the qualities of surfaces and how light lands on them. Years ago, when I was a 3D artist in video games, it's one of the things that I paid attention to quite a bit when making my texture maps was the quality of the light and the surface I wanted to get across to the player in the game. And if you don't get that right, then it starts looking weird, and I don't think people relate to it as well. I think that's the whole thing, is that you're trying to convince people that this is a relatable environment or experience. It's kind of the same thing in painting as well. When you're painting, you're not going to paint clouds the same way you would paint hair. It just wouldn't make any sense. And so you have to pay attention to not only how the light hits the surface, but what strokes you use are also important. Here, like usual, I'm using a Winsor Newton Series 7 No. 2 with Speedball Black Magic ink. One of my favorite things about inking this book, or actually working on the Overman, is inking Dimitri, because he's got all these weird, wiry lines on his skin, and he's got all these nodules and things sticking out of him that no two images will ever look alike. And I attribute that to maybe his skin is always moving or migrating or something weird. I don't know. But it's kind of a fun landscape to be working across when inking him. Suffice it to say, I'm not the one who actually created the first Dmitri Leonov. Scott is an accomplished illustrator as well, and the one thing I like about Scott's work is that he just has such a weird way of thinking. It's so bizarre. Like if you've ever seen any of his science fiction stuff, whether he's written it or drawn it, it's so weird. Every time I see it, I'm always jealous because I want to go that weird. And so when I got a chance to work on this book, I was a little intimidated about it, but at the same time, I also felt like thematically and story-wise, I had a good handle on what he's looking for. And so if you've read The Overman or haven't, you should definitely check it out, because imagine if David Cronenberg had directed, say, Blade Runner and, 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's pretty weird, but it's really entertaining. It's one of my favorite projects that I've worked on for how out there it is. And we were pretty glad to have Image pick it up when they did, and we just had all the stars align for us, so that was pretty great. One of the reasons why we're releasing the collected edition on Comixology is because the trade paperback is no longer available. If you find a copy, you'll be lucky, because I think it's not only out of print, but it's no longer available from the publisher. So I'm not even sure I have any extra copies. I might have 2 or 3 of the original trade that you saw in the beginning of the video, but as far as the single issues go and the actual trade, I'm not even sure where you'd be able to find them other than the quarter bin somewhere. So the story behind the Overman kind of goes like this. In 1990, when I was in college, I met Scott when he was looking for a roommate, and he was into comics and Frank Miller at the time, and I was into comics as well, and so I think I showed him how to ink something, or I don't know how it happened, but he was inking some of his art, and it was really good. And then I noticed, he's probably going to hate me for saying this, but I noticed he was using the crow quill upside down. I mean, he had the nib on the page, but it was flipped over, and he was bending the heck out of it and ruining his nibs and going through them like they were tissue papers. After showing him, hey, you probably save yourself some money if you use these right, he switched over and had to adapt his inking style to the way the actual crow quill worked. That was kind of funny. But from that point on, we've been really good friends, and we were working on different projects or trying to get different projects off the ground because we both wanted to get into comics really bad. And we thought, why not limp across the finish line together? And so he originally had this story called Gods of War, and as I was laying in my bed, he would yell from the other room the actual plot of the story. And so he would sort of talk it out at night, and then I'd fall asleep and have these really messed up dreams. And it just kind of stuck with me for a long, long time. And at some point, this is the part where it gets a little fuzzy. He said, hey, let's work on the Overman. I'm like, okay, send me a script. And so he sent me the first script, and it was really good, and I really liked it a lot. And he had character designs, including Dmitry Leonov. And so I started penciling it, and I think I got about 12 pages in, and we took it to a convention, and we had some editors look at the stuff and tell us, we sucked or whatever. And I think Scott even inked the first round of pages, and we totally got our butts handed to us. So a few years later, he wanted to try it again, but he never had an ending to the story, and that was kind of weird to me. I was like, I really wanted to know how it ended. I didn't want to start something and then there not be an ending to it. I began in earnest again, and I drew even more pages. I think I drew like a whole first issue, and I think he inked it again, and we were both better at the time, but I think we sent it around and got nowhere with it. Just absolutely no anything. Again, we shelved that project and moved on to something else. I think we were working on another sci-fi thing together at one point, and then that failed, and just a lot of that learning and burning as you go. Flash forward like 20 years, and he sends me a chapter from a novel called The Overman. And I'm like, what's going on? What's this about? And so I started reading it, and it was really good. It was better than the first time around, and I don't know what was going on. I don't know if he was possessed or something, but then like the next week I got another chapter, and I'm like, what is this? It's like getting better, it's growing, and it's kind of like that feeling you get whether you're watching a train wreck about to happen or someone who might succeed at a goal, or shooting a basket or something. Slowly and surely, I kept getting more and more chapters until the ending, and it was phenomenal. It was just like, holy crap, he did it. It was he pulled it off, and so I was just stoked. I'm like, holy moly, what are we gonna do? I call him up. I'm just pumped, and he's like, well, do you want to draw it? I'm like, hell yeah. I just finished a graphic novel, and I was pitching another one around, and that wasn't getting picked up. So I started in earnest on the pre-production on this, and spent like 3 months getting all the characters laid out and designed, and putting my spin on them. And then he converted it over to a comic script, and so we had 5 issues at 32 pages each, including covers or something. And so I pitched it to Image and at a show one time, and Eric Stevenson was there, and he liked it and picked it up. It was, simple as that. And I was like, damn, I wish it was always that simple, but whatever it was a blessing, because we certainly were, it was a long time coming, As it happened, I ended up doing all the artwork. The lettering and design and penciling and inking and coloring was all on me. And I managed to do 1 issue every 3 months. And I ended up working on this for maybe a year or so, because I was trying to work on freelance in between things. Once I finished it, it was a nice ending to an odyssey, as it were, of something that took more time than it should have, but I think it was about the right time because we were both ready to see it to its conclusion. Speaking of which, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you think about it, go to Comixology and check out The Overman under my Studiowhite Productions banner. It's priced reasonably, so everyone can pick it up and read it. And it's got never before seen art that even the trade paperbacks never had. Hopefully you enjoy it. And if you do, please leave a comment below, like, subscribe, tell a friend, pass it along. And as always, thanks for watching.